All right, let's get right into it. We're going to talk about a single product, just one thing, that's on the verge of kicking off an industrial revolution bigger than anything we have ever seen. And no, this isn't just about going to Mars. It's about building a whole new economy, literally right above our heads. I know, that sounds like crazy hyperbole, right? But just hang with me for a minute. That one sentence really sets the stage for everything we're about to dig into, because once you see the numbers and you see how this has all happened before, you're going to realize we're standing on the edge of something absolutely massive. So, where does this all begin? It starts with something that honestly looked like it was ripped straight out of a sci-fi blockbuster. I'm talking about SpaceX catching a 20-story tall rocket booster as it falls from the sky with a giant pair of robot chopsticks. I mean, come on. But here's the thing. That was not just a stunt. It wasn't for clicks or for shock and awe value. No, that was a proof of concept. It was a live demonstration showing the world that full, rapid reusability isn't a dream anymore. It's real. And that capability, that's the key. That is what unlocks this entire new orbital economy. Okay, so you're probably asking, how does one cool rocket catch turn into a multi-trillion-dollar economy? Well, it all boils down to one simple, powerful thing. A crazy, almost unbelievable drop in the price of admission, the cost to get to orbit. And the engine driving this price collapse is this really cool economic principle called Wright's law. Basically, it just says that for every time you double the number of things you've produced, your costs drop by a predictable chunk. Think about solar panels. Back in '77, they were $76 a watt. Today, they're like 20 cents. Why? Because we've made billions of them. And SpaceX, they're just taking that same factory logic and applying it to rockets. And the scale of this change, it is just mind-blowing. Seriously, look at this. Back in the space shuttle days, sending 1 kilogram, that's basically a bag of sugar, into orbit, cost $54,000. Then the Falcon 9 came along and dropped that to $2,700, which was already a revolution. But Starship, oh man. Starship is targeting $10. 10! From $54,000 to 10. So let's just let that sink in. We're talking about making space access 5,000 times cheaper. 5,000x. That's not an improvement, that's a paradigm shift. Imagine a $50,000 first-class ticket around the world suddenly costing you $10 for a bus ride across town. When a price drops that much, you don't just do the old things cheaper. You throw out the entire rulebook and start doing things that were never possible before. And you know what? This isn't some weird new phenomenon. This has happened before. History has a playbook for this. When you crash the cost of moving stuff around, you completely remake the world. For example, let's look at container shipping. Back in 1956, that simple metal box drops the cost of loading cargo by 97%. 97%. And that didn't just make shipping a bit cheaper, it literally created the global economy as we know it today. Entire countries, huge export economies, all built on the back of that one simple innovation. And we saw the exact same thing with the internet, right? The cost of bandwidth dropped by like 1,000 times between the 90s and today. That gave us Netflix, YouTube, the whole $10 trillion digital economy. You trying to stream this right now on an old dial-up modem, it would have cost you hundreds, maybe thousands of dollars. The companies that define our modern lives were simply impossible before that cost collapse. So history's repeating itself. And just like with shipping and the internet, the pioneers of this new orbital age, they're already here. These are companies building businesses based on an economic reality that just flat out didn't exist a few years ago. Let's talk about Varda's Space Industries. These guys aren't just sending stuff up to space. No, they're manufacturing things in space and bringing them back. You know, for the last 60 years, the main reason we went to space was for exploration, for inspiration. Varda is changing that reason to profit. They're making things like pharmaceutical compounds in microgravity, drugs that you literally cannot make down here on Earth because gravity messes up their molecular structure. And they're not stopping there. They're looking at making super high-quality semiconductors in orbit too. Suddenly, the reason to go to space isn't just about pushing the frontier. It's because there's a killer business case. It's because there is serious money to be made. Okay, if you thought that was cool, get ready for this next one. It sounds like something straight out of a novel, but here's the kicker. It's being funded by the very same people who wrote the first check to SpaceX. The company is called Reflect Orbital, and their business plan? Put 4,000 mirrors into orbit, each one the size of a basketball court,
and use them to redirect sunlight to solar farms on Earth at night. I mean, how wild is that? But let's talk numbers, because this is where it gets insane. Before Starship, launching that would have cost $3.5 billion. B, with a B. With Starship, $5 million. A business idea that was pure fantasy is now basically a rounding error on a VC spreadsheet. That's what's changed.
So, okay, we've got space factories and orbital power plants. Cool, but that's just layer one. The next level up is when we start taking the biggest things happening down here on Earth and moving them up there. And after that, you start looking at the resources of the entire solar system. Things like asteroid mining. Think about AI. Down here, data centers are hitting a wall. They consume insane amounts of power, and they generate a ridiculous amount of heat. Well, guess what space has in unlimited supply? Continuous 24/7 solar power, and the coldest, most perfect vacuum you could ever ask for to dump all that heat. NVIDIA's already working on AI chips for space. From a pure physics standpoint, putting data centers in orbit is an absolute no-brainer.
Okay, but wait a minute. This all leads to a massive question. We're talking about building all this new infrastructure in space. Factories, power plants, data centers. Who's going to build it? Who's going to maintain it? You can't exactly send a union crew of thousands of construction workers into orbit.
The answer? Robots. It's the only answer that makes sense. Just look at the cost. To keep one human astronaut alive and working on the International Space Station costs about $1.4 million a day. Now compare that to a humanoid robot. Once you get them mass-produced, they can work 24/7 in the harsh vacuum of space for an effective labor cost of maybe $2 an hour. That's it. That's the workforce. That's who will build this new economy.
All right, so we can kind of see the first few waves of this coming. It makes sense. But if there's one thing history teaches us, it's that the biggest, most world-changing stuff is almost always the stuff nobody predicts.
I mean, think about it. The people who built the ARPANET, the early internet, they weren't sitting around thinking about streaming cat videos, right? And when Apple designed the first iPhone, do you think they ever imagined an app where you'd get into a stranger's car for a ride? Of course not. The first ideas are almost never the ones that end up being the most valuable. The really huge society-changing value always comes later. It's what people invent after the new technology becomes so cheap and common that we just take it for granted. That's where the real money is hiding, the tens of trillions of dollars. And so that leaves us with the big one, the really exciting trillion-dollar question. Now that the cost of getting to orbit is dropping by a factor of 5,000, what's the space equivalent of Uber? What's the Netflix of orbit? What's that mind-blowing, world-changing industry that is on its way right now that absolutely no one has even thought of yet? Not the Wall Street analysts, not the folks at NASA, maybe not even the people at SpaceX. We can't see it yet, but the math, the cost curves, they basically guarantee it's coming.